Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a seriously fascinating metaphysical framework all about the nature of the soul. We're basing this entirely on a really intriguing 2006 philosophical text written by Feng. If you've ever found yourself wondering about the actual mechanics of consciousness or, what really happens after we pass, this text offers a highly structured, almost mechanical view of spirituality. It basically takes the ethereal and breaks it down into pure logic. So let's jump right in.
To kick things off, the author asks a surprisingly profound riddle to ground this incredibly esoteric topic. He asks, what do machines, like giant ships and airplanes, and biological beings, like us humans or animals, actually have in common when it comes to movement? Now, I know it sounds like a weird riddle, but the text uses this to set the foundation for literally everything we're about to discuss. Think about it. Neither a massive, heavy iron train nor a biological human body can just move on its own accord, right?
The text actually uses a great everyday example to highlight this idea. Imagine standing at a train station and hearing someone yell, "The train's coming!" Or picture a little girl shouting to her mom, "Look, Daddy's coming home!" According to the source material, when we say things like this, we aren't actually reacting to the physical metal of the train or the literal flesh of the human body. No, we're intuitively recognizing the animator inside that physical shell.
And this brilliantly illustrates the source's core thesis. On one side of the equation, we have what is called the vessel. These are material aggregates, our physical bodies, cars, trains, whatever. They are totally motionless on their own. But on the other side, we have the driver. These are the animators, the souls, the people actually operating the machinery. The text argues that physical structures are basically just aggregates of materials clumped together by energy. It's the non-material driver, whether that's a human steering a ship or a soul animating a biological body, that actually provides the movement and that vital spark of life.
Okay, let's take this analogy just a little bit deeper. Think about what happens at the end of a long commute. The driver gets off the train sits there, totally motionless and dead. But the driver? The driver isn't dead, right? The author points out that this exact same logic applies to our existence. Just like the train driver simply stepping away from the control panel, a soul leaving its physical flesh doesn't die when the biological body perishes. The vessel simply stops, but the driver, they just keep going.
Section 2. Evidence of the independent soul.
So if the soul is simply a driver temporarily occupying a vessel, you're probably wondering, what actual proof does the text offer? Well, it points to three main areas of observed evidence. First up is Western near-death research. Second, we have instances of reincarnation, which the author describes as souls simply finding new carriers to continue their missions, kind of like a driver trading in for a new car. And third, which is maybe the most fascinating, is what the text calls soul infusion. This is described as situations where a totally normal person's voice, their intonation, their whole behavior suddenly and inexplicably changes. The text posits this happens because a completely different soul has temporarily borrowed their vessel to express itself. Pretty wild, right?
The author actually takes this a step further and cites specific documented works as proof. We're talking about channeled texts like Jane Roberts' Seth Materials or Neil's Conversations with God. The source views these works as direct, documented evidence that an independent, separate consciousness can express itself through a living human carrier. Basically, in this framework, they're treated as hard proof of a foreign soul temporarily stepping right into the driver's seat to deliver some information.
Section 3. Defining the esoteric. What is a soul?
Okay, so we've established the concept of the driver, but what exactly are they made of? The text doesn't just leave this vague. It gives us a very explicit definition. A soul is strictly defined as a non-material structure possessing spirituality. It's a really precise, almost architectural way of describing something we usually think of as purely mystical. But, and this is absolutely crucial, the author makes a very careful distinction here when it comes to energy.
Now, what's super interesting about this breakdown is how the text separates two concepts that get confused all the time. Souls are described merely as carriers of consciousness that contain what it calls small psychic energy regiments. On the flip side, psychic energy itself is the absolute, omnipresent source of life found literally everywhere in the universe. So the soul isn't the energy itself, right? It's really just a structured container holding a tiny, regimented piece of that massive universal energy.
Section 4. The 8 characteristics of souls.
To make this abstract container concept crystal clear, the author meticulously outlines 8 defining characteristics. The first 4 really hammer home their highly ethereal nature. Number 1, they have a spiritual nature and are fundamentally alive.
2, they are entirely non-material. I mean, invisible, inaudible, untouchable, and totally immeasurable in our physical world. 3, they are completely weightless. And 4, they are, at their very core, consciousnesses. These points firmly establish the soul as something existing entirely outside the normal bounds of traditional material physics.
The remaining 4 traits are where the mechanics get really specific. Trait 5 states they can only function in the material world when attached to a carrier, meaning they absolutely need a physical vessel to interact with us here. 6, they retain memory. 7, they possess regional properties. And 8, they can actually penetrate physical substances, slipping in through microscopic gaps just like beams of light or radio waves.
And because they can penetrate matter like waves, the text makes an absolutely astonishing claim about potential carriers. Are you ready for this? It's not limited to biology. While people and animals are obvious vessels, the text argues that souls can inhabit inanimate objects too. We're talking computers, vehicles, trees, even stones can theoretically host a non-material driver. Think about that, a rock with a soul. The rule here is basically, as long as it's a material aggregate, it can theoretically host a non-material driver.
Section 5. The Journey After Death.
So what happens when the physical vessel inevitably breaks down and the driver absolutely must move on? Well, according to the author, the afterlife is definitely not some chaotic, random free-for-all. The reincarnation of souls is a highly organized, highly systematic process. It strictly abides by the management and arrangement of Tao. Basically, the text presents a universe that is incredibly orderly and deliberate. Every single soul's next step is just part of a grander structural design.
The source actually maps out this cosmic mechanic as a precise step-by-step procedure. Step 1, obviously, is the death of the carrier. Then, in Step 2, all souls must pass through a massive transitional phase literally called the continent for 3 realms. Step 3 is where it gets really fascinating. It's a filtering process. The text describes souls passing through different density layers. Finally, in Step 4, based entirely on that exact filtering, the soul arrives in its new corresponding space.
So, the million-dollar question here is understanding exactly how this cosmic filter actually grades you. What pushes a soul through a higher density layer versus getting stuck in a lower one? What exactly dictates your final destination, whether that soul goes to heaven, hell, or just gets sent right back down to Earth for another round?
The text gives us a very clear, very direct answer. A soul's destination depends entirely on its contents. And what are those contents? They are its consciousnesses. It's essentially a qualitative measurement of what the driver is holding on to. This is exactly why the author notes that their specific community, Life Shine You On, focuses primarily on identifying and refining consciousness rather than just worrying about the soul itself. It's all about upgrading the contents of your container so you can pass right through those higher density layers.
As we wrap up this explainer, the text leaves us with a seriously profound mystery to chew on in our daily lives. If you are merely the driver of a temporary biological train, if your physical body is really just a vessel that you will inevitably step out of one day, what exactly are you filling your non-material consciousness with today? Because according to this framework, when you eventually step off that train, those contents are the only luggage you actually get to carry with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning and keep learning.